in a portfolio format. This is just to show that, again, let's review. These are the 7 assessment competencies that was reiterated in the session of Dr. David. And we're showing here on the second column how the specific strands of the main 5 in the Philippine Professional Standards of Teachers actually converge with these assessment competencies. Okay, so what are the features of the assessment plan? So what do you put in the assessment plan? There are actually 4 things that you put in your assessment plan. Okay, first is that given each of the assessment competencies, you now start to think about what is your goal, what is your own objective in order to improve yourself on that particular assessment competency, especially if you are weak on that particular assessment competency, or you need to maintain, or you need to further enhance that particular assessment competency. You state that by putting in your objective. Then start to think about the strategies and activities that you need to do so that you will be able to attain that particular objective that you have indicated. When you start implementing and engaging in these particular activities, what are some of these evidences that you have produced? And this is something that you'll have to put in later as part of the assessment plan portfolio. And then after you have produced these particular outputs that are aligned with the professional development objectives that you have stated, you now start to put in your reflection and put in there what have you improved, what have you realized when you have produced that particular activity and engage on the strategies. Okay, first let's talk about how do you formulate your professional development objectives. Now take note that your professional development objectives needs to be aligned with the assessment competency. We have 7 assessment competencies, and at least you can put in 1 professional development objective for each assessment competency. But take note, you can have more than 1 for each assessment competency. And I'm pretty sure that you are all teachers and you know how to formulate objectives. So generally, you follow our rule, which is SMART. Your objectives needs to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Take note that this objective is something that you want to attain so that you will further enhance your assessment competency. Then, after putting in your objective, you now start to think about what strategies do you need to do in order to attain that particular objective. Okay, so these strategies are meant to be implemented and executed. And take note that these strategies does not depart with your actual work. So whatever practice that you are doing, when you go through the teaching and the learning process, when you teach for this school year, these are actually the strategies. Examples of strategies can actually contain programs, activities, projects, and other procedures that you do as part of the teaching and the learning process when you start engaging in the practice of assessment. Okay, examples of strategies would be the rubrics that you have produced, brainstorming with your co-teachers when you develop tasks that are anchored on 21st century skills or the most essential learning competencies, when you facilitate sessions on providing student feedback, when you engage in LAC sessions, and others. Now, we need to look at what you have produced and how did you actually implement these particular strategies by putting in the evidences. So what are these evidences? So later on, you have to attach these evidences to demonstrate, okay, each of the standards of the assessment competencies. And make sure that these evidences are aligned again with the objective and the activities that you have that you went through and produced. Now, take note that these evidences are means of verification on how well you have actually achieved the assessment competency and how well you have achieved the objectives that you have stated in your assessment plan. And then make sure that when you put in your evidences, you now start to put in your reflections. So the reflection explain, okay, how is the evidence demonstrating the assessment competency, how you showed your career stage level in the PPST, and how your competence was improved. Okay, and what are some of the lessons that you have learned when you have engaged in that particular task in producing that evidence? Okay, so the evidences are actually the works that you have produced over time for this entire school year. So you can start collecting some of these evidences that are aligned with the assessment competencies and the objectives that you have stated. Okay, so what you need to put here are documents, sample test items, the rubric that you have produced, instructions you made for performance-based tasks, okay, the worksheets, the exercises, the reports, the plan. If you have conducted research, you have gathered data, some processes, certificates, artifacts, websites that you have built, contents that you have produced online, some illustrations, videos, work outputs, the modules that you did, reference materials that you have read, and your insights on that one. Okay, now take note that these evidences needs to carefully match the assessment competency required. And at least, there's one evidence provided for each assessment competency. Now, when you start making your assessment plan, make sure that you label each part, okay, and label these particular evidence. So what is the evidence? What is the evidence? What is it for? What particular grade level did you use it for? What type of learners did you use it for? So these are some labels so that we are guided later on when we look at your evidences. And then, of course, for every evidence, you have to put in your reflection. So the reflection can be a short paragraph, generally about 2 sentences or more. And what you put in here is a description of the task that you have produced and the lessons that you have learned. Describe generally and justify how that particular evidence demonstrates the assessment competency, or the lessons learned include there, how did it help you improve your teaching? Explain what are some of the new skills that you have gained when you went through in the production of that evidence, and explain what you have realized after doing or engaging in the task. So here is an example on how you summarize your assessment plan. So you can actually create a table, and then the columns that you need to put can begin with the assessment standard. Then the second column is followed by your corresponding professional development objective to meet that standard. Put in next the strategies that you will implement, and what are some of the corresponding evidences that you will be producing. And then put in the page number in your portfolio where the reflection is actually found. And then you can make one row for each of the standards. Okay, now let me read to you an example. Okay, let's take a look at this one. For example, one of the standards would be communicate assessment results to students, parents, educators, and other lay audience. Okay, what you need to do now here is the objective now that is aligned with this competency is to plan an asynchronous learning session for each MELC where feedback is provided for the student's performance. So what strategies are you going to do? So you list the feedback on each of the tasks submitted to the learners. Then you plan a lesson, how to deliver the feedback in an asynchronous and synchronous session. What are some of the evidence that you can put? So the sample students' work with your feedback, sample learning plan with strategies on how to deliver the feedback, and then you design your own assessment report template in communicating assessment results. And then you will notice that the page number is indicated below. And when we look at the assessment plan, this is the page number where we can see these evidences. And then on the last column, this is the page where the reflection is actually going to be found. Okay, so this is how you actually summarize the parts of your assessment plan. So first, you put in your identification. What is your name, the school where you're affiliated, number that you're teaching, your position, okay? The subject and the grade levels that you're including in your assessment plan, the content standards, and the learning competencies that you are working along. And then part 2, you can put in your summary, which is the table that I have shown a while ago. And then for each part, you now put in
Maraming salamat. At kung ikaw ay interesado ng mga bidyong tulad nito, mangyaring suportahan ang channel na ito sa pamamagitan ng pagpindot ng like, pag-share ng mga video at kung bago ka pa lang sa channel na ito, please subscribe sa channel na ito at pindutin ang notification bell at piliin ang all upang maabisuhan ka para sa mga paparating pang mga video.